this is story and imagination and telling our pasts and predicting our futures. That's the magic of why we get into this business.
I really wish I would have taken myself seriously as somebody who could make art earlier in my life. I didn't know anybody who made money creatively.
Audiences want to see things that are new. I want to go see a story I've never seen before, and that's what we're betting on.
As you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you're on and its history. We're located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We're grateful to work on this land.
Look at that. Look at that. Oh my goodness. I'm not even the main event, and I get oh my goodness, that is too kind. Hello and welcome everyone. We're thrilled to have you at this year's industry conference at the 49th Annual Toronto International Film Festival presented by Rogers. My name is Jeff McNunn. I'm the Senior Director of Industry and Theatrical Programming here at TIFF, as well as the lead programmer of Prime Time. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our next session titled Visionaries, celebrating 20 years of The Blacklist. The Blacklist is a place of creation and connection, a platform for the industry's most talented writers, and a proven resource shaping the present and future of storytelling. Celebrating their 20-year anniversary, founder and CEO Franklin Leonard joins us today to share what's next for the platform, the evolution into a rich and supportive community of creators, and the Blacklist's commitment to supporting writers on a global scale. I'm going to give you some stats here. They're very impressive. To date, more than 400 scripts from the Blacklist annual survey have been produced as feature films, resulting in more than $30 billion in global box office, 300 Academy Award nominations, 50 wins, including 4 Best Pictures, and nearly half of all screenwriting Oscars awarded since 2007. An impressive feat for being only 20 years old. Me at 20, not even close to any of that. Our programming is made possible by the support of all of our sponsors and partners. A sincere thank you to our presenting sponsor, Rogers, our major sponsors, RBC and Visa, our major industry supporters, Ontario Creates and Telefilm Canada, and our media partner for all of our visionaries, The Hollywood Reporter. Guiding us through this conversation is TIFF's CEO, Cameron Bailey. Please join me in welcoming Cameron and Franklin to the stage.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Welcome. Franklin, we are going to talk about the incredible success of The Blacklist. We're going to talk about how you did it, why you did it. But I want to kind of start by going way back.
Okay.
And I'm curious to know, first of all, when you were a kid, what did you love reading?
Anything. Yeah, I was a big reader as a kid. I was definitely the kid who, my parents would sort of be like, all right, it's bedtime, and and they had to have known, how did I have a flashlight?
You were actually that kid under the
Yeah, I was the kid under the
flashlight.
blanket with a flashlight, and actually, I only thought about it now, I wasn't replacing the batteries on that flashlight, so my parents definitely were, and being like, oh, bedtime, have a good night, knowing full well what I'd be doing. But I was reading Hardy Boys books and Gordon Corman and stuff like that, who I think is Canadian. Yeah, I was reading anything and everything that was sort of available to me. And I was also, as a kid, very into baseball statistics.
Oh,
weirdly.
yeah. Okay.
Like, I remember as a kid asking for the Bill James baseball almanac every year for Christmas. And I think I was just really interested in how to organize the world. Like, okay, you have all these players, this is what they do, who's good at this, who's good at that, and how do you put together a team? I don't think I knew that at the time, but I think that was kind of what was driving it.
So even as a child, you had a story mind, you loved reading, and you had a data mind as well.
Yeah, I was math was my, like, the one subject in school that came very easily to me. And it was always just like, yeah, okay, I'll do this. I enjoy it. I'm on the math team. Like, I was a big...
You're on the math team, you just let that slip.
Oh, no, it wasn't slip. I mean, it's definitely part of my identity.
I love, by the way.
Nerds, we have to own it. No, I was like captain of the math team. To be
Seriously?
clear. Yeah, I was, no, like, that was my thing.
Right, okay.
The reality is, I was basically Steve Urkel while Steve Urkel was on television, which was not great for my social life, especially in West Central Georgia. But yeah, that was very much who I was as a kid.
Also part of a military family. Your dad was in the military, so that usually means moving around a lot.
It does.
And what did that do to your outlook growing up?
So yeah, I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. We moved when I was 2 to El Paso, Texas, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Germany for 3 years. And when I was about 8 years old, we moved to Columbus, Georgia, which is where my dad is from, but he was stationed at Fort Benning, which is what I think it's no longer called Fort Benning because Benning was a Confederate general. But that was where he grew up. That was sort of where he ended up retiring from the Army. And I think it just gave me a sense that there was a very big world out there that I wanted to see and that I wanted to participate in and that I wanted to have exposure to. So by the time I was 8 years old and we moved to Columbus, Georgia, which is, a sort of ex-urban community about 2 hours south of Atlanta, I knew I wasn't going to stay there.
Okay.
And even if most of my peers, most of the people I went to high school with were going to, I was definitely like, I don't know where I'm going, but it's not here.
Okay.
And I think movies were my first glimpse at what that could be. Right?
And what was that first window that opened into movies for you?
I mean, the first movie I remember going to multiple times in the theater was Jurassic Park.
Okay.
I think it came out right around the time I was just old enough that my mother felt comfortable leaving me at a movie theater by myself, right? So there was a sort of sense of freedom that came with being in a movie theater without adult supervision. But at the same time, I also remember, I think it sort of like was a convergence of the story mind and like my interest in science, and it was like, and then also just, oh my God, here's something that I never thought I'd see. These are dinosaurs running around with
walking
people.
around with human beings.
And then the John Williams score, that score is still a classic.
I'm older than you, and for me, it was Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah,
that was the first movie that I went to multiple times on my own. And somebody should do some kind of data analysis of what kind of weird juju Steven Spielberg has.
I mean, the man has hits. It's interesting. I also think that, but it was also, I mean, look, the first thing I did when I got my driver's license was drive to Blockbuster. And I rented all the Godfather movies.
Okay.
Because I hadn't seen them yet. And I was like, I'm going to watch all 3 of them back to back to back. It was just, that was, it was how I marked time. It wasn't like I had a social life in high school. So, movies were my friends.
Okay. I think you're in good company here.
Yeah, exactly.
You're in the right place.
My people.
Was Harvard always a natural choice?
I think Harvard was, in the mind of a 17-year-old, the best place to go. It was like, if I'm getting out of here and I'm a big nerd, that's what you're supposed to aspire towards. And I think it was a really good launch pad for me out of where I was. I don't know if knowing what I know now at 45, whether it would be my first choice, but I think it was ideal for the person who I was at 17 years old. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I hadn't had exposure to a lot of what was possible in the world, and that was a place that no matter what it was that I decided that I was into that day, there was a deep vein of very impressive people who were doing that thing.
Right.
And I think I really relished that. So whether it was politics or literature or science or math, whatever I was into at any given moment, I could sort of go deep on that without much effort, which was a really exciting thing.
I want to ask you about how you first began thinking of putting the power of math, of data, towards finding and assessing quality in stories, bringing those two worlds, those two parts of yourself together. Many of us would have read the story of how the first Blacklist came together. Some of us would have had to look up exactly what a pivot table is. But
Excel, baby.
yeah, just talk a little bit about that first spark of, you've got a massive data set out there. Nobody's quite done this in this way before, and how you brought those two things together.
Yeah, I can say that I didn't think about it like that. Like, I really was just in my office one night. I was working for Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, Appian Way. I'm in my office. It was probably a Thursday night that I started thinking about it. I knew that I was going to be taking home a ton of scripts on the Friday that were not going to be great. And I, had had a lot of weekends of taking home a ton of scripts, reading all of them, and having them not be amazing. And, I've told this story a lot, but my mom used to call me every week and ask if my LSAT scores were still valid. Because why was this went on for a very long time, even post-Blacklist. Why was I working in film and television? Like, it wasn't something that they had ever expected for me. And I think it wasn't that they didn't want me to do it, is that they worried it wasn't a safe job, right? I think, you're from a Caribbean family.
Yes.
Yes, it's the same thing. Like, my mom's dad is from Trinidad. It was like doctor, lawyer, engineer. These are safe jobs, you're smart, you can get one of them, why aren't you doing that? And I was like, well, she's gonna call me again on Monday about the LSAT scores, and it's gonna hurt, because she's not necessarily wrong. And I knew that if I couldn't solve this problem of finding good screenplays, that I was gonna have to take that more seriously. And I think it was just like, okay, well, what can I do to find some good scripts? Like, it really was an exigent need, selfishly, to solve a problem that I had. And I think I, took this survey and then said, okay, well, I'll just aggregate the information and send it back out. But it wasn't, there was no sort of like, oh, I'm gonna build something, or oh, I'm gonna synthesize these two interests of mine. It really was, I have this very specific problem that I need to solve for me, or this job, or I'm gonna hate this job. And without realizing that everyone was in that situation. And then, when you solve a problem that everyone shares, that's when you can start to build something, or at least that's been my experience.
I mean, in the world of screen storytelling, it really is one of the most important, if not perhaps the most important innovation in the past 2 decades. It is the best predictor of Oscar success, and Oscar success means so much in this industry. Let me just ask you this before we move on. Do you feel like that's recognized enough?
I don't. I mean, I'll say two things. The first is, I and no one at my team wrote, directed, produced, gaffed, did craft service on any of those movies, right? And so I don't want to give anybody the impression that I or anyone associated with the Blacklist is taking credit for the success of those movies. The credit for those movies goes to the people who made them, and everybody who made them, not just the director. But I do think this, like, what we've done, I think, is build this, sort of weird metal detector that finds these needles in a haystack. And I think we can take credit for that. And the interesting thing is that it's not even just a predictor of Oscar success. The Oscar numbers are really impressive, but in some ways more exciting to me, and certainly more exciting to my mother, because it has Harvard Business School associated with it, is that Harvard Business School did a study on the annual Blacklist a couple years ago and found that movies made from the annual Blacklist make 90% more in revenue than movies made from scripts not on the annual Blacklist.
90%?
90% more, controlling for all other factors. Yeah. So controlling for what studio released it, what the budget was, what the marketing budget was, how many territories it was distributed internationally, 90% more. And I think that means two things. I think one, it means that good writing is the best business plan, and always has been. And I think we undervalue writers in Hollywood, which is really what the WGA strike was about last year. And the second thing is that it is possible to identify good writing, which I think a lot of people in the industry dismiss. It's like, oh, well, there's no way to like really put a value on the writing. We have to focus on these concrete things like what's the genre, what's the budget, who are the stars. It's like, no, with a little bit of effort, with a little bit of thinking seriously about how to evaluate something, with a recognition that like qualitative judgments are fundamentally subjective, you can get a pretty good idea of what's worth investing in. And I don't think that people have, look, if in any other business setting, if I said, hey, I can predict success at a rate of 90%, or I can predict success among these products, and by what I say indicates that it's highly likely that it will have a 90% higher revenue, people would be throwing money at investing in that, that picker.
That's interesting to me because so often the maxims we hear about Hollywood are about randomness and chaos. You know, nobody knows anything, or towns run on fear, or just people just scrambling around trying to figure out what's going to work.
Yeah.
But you found what works. And if that's not appropriately recognized, I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised that you've not been chased after. Maybe you have been chased after by streamers which run on data, studios saying, bring your insight and your process into our business.
Well, it's interesting. I think that all of those maxims are right on some level, right? It is a town governed by fear. You know, it's interesting. The nobody knows anything quote is fascinating because it's true, no one knows anything. And the William Goldman, if you read the rest of the William Goldman paragraph, what he says is nobody knows anything for sure. But if you do enough work and you're familiar enough with the craft, you can make an educated guess, right? And what the blacklist is a really educated guess that has now been validated by Harvard Business School in terms of like the revenue response. And I think the quality of the films, you know, via the Oscars, et cetera, speaks for itself. I'd say that some people have been chasing, but again, I think that if anybody else or in any other business, if you had that kind of like HBS study, people would invest significantly in testing that business hypothesis. I think one of the reasons that people don't in Hollywood is that it's not, in many ways, a rational, efficient business. People are not making decisions based on what is best for the company's bottom line. They're not necessarily making decisions on what's best even for their individual movies that they're making. They're making decisions based on a set of incentives that are not aligned with the overall financial health of the business or even the overall financial health of the company, right? If you're a studio head, you may pay actor A $20 million, not because you think that that movie is gonna make a ton of money, but because you know that you're not gonna be president of that studio forever, and when it comes time to become a producer, it'd be really handy to be able to call actor A and be like, hey, listen, we're friends, right? I got you that $20 million for that movie that made no money. I got this other script, maybe you'll read it. Right? And that's hyperbole to some extent, but it does like make clear, I think, where incentives can be misaligned and what the consequences of that misalignment might be.
You have to kind of control for self-interest, which is a very powerful motivator in this and probably any business.
Probably the most powerful motivator.
Yeah.
And you know, ideal systems, ideal markets work when self-interest is sort of rightly directed for the benefit of both the individual and the community as a whole.
Speaking of how the industry as a whole doesn't necessarily operate on entirely profit-driven or sound business principles, tell us more about the $10 billion that Hollywood leaves on the table every year.
Yeah, okay, so what Cameron's referring to is a study by my former employer, McKinsey & Company, consulting company and sort of noted social justice warriors. I use scare quotes because if you Google or already know, that description is ironic. You know, they did a study in 2021, basically seeking to investigate how much money the industry is leaving on the table by underinvesting in black talent. Or, I think as they frame it, how much money is being left on the table due to anti-black bias. And their conclusion was $10 billion every year. And that study came out in 2021, and not much has changed since 2021. Arguably, the industry has retrenched away from the progress that they made and the commitments that they made immediately following the murder of George Floyd. The kicker is, since that study, they've also done studies on how much money the industry is leaving on the table due to anti-Asian bias. It's about 4 to 6 billion, and anti-Latino bias, another 12 to 15. So we're talking about 25, 30 billion dollars a year just based on racial bias. We're not even talking about women, people with disabilities, the indigenous community, or even frankly, just like, regular old American nationalism. And I think that it's unfortunate because look, if my attitude is I can't control what you think about other people. Like, you may go home and you may be racist, you may be sexist, etc. But I can hope that when you come to work, that your racism and sexism doesn't prevent all of us from getting this money. And right now, the fact of the matter is, that's what's happening, is that the people who have the authority to make these decisions about investments in talent, investments of significant resources of capital, are making them in a suboptimal way for business as a result of their misassumptions and their incorrect assumptions about various groups of people. And in short, that means they're bad at their job, right?
Yeah. So in an industry that's going through so much change, there's so much crisis that people talk about, in the theatrical film industry in particular, and there is this vast sum of money that could, according to McKinsey, be gained by just telling more diverse stories, having more diverse people behind and in front of the camera. People are willfully giving up that money and suffering. What explains that?
I mean, racism is sort of the short answer.
Thank you for saying that out.
And the second is incompetence, right? Again, I don't know if that money is being left on the table because someone is racist, but I know it's being left on the table. So pick your poison. It's either because you don't recognize that you have this racial bias and you're making decisions driven by that racial bias, or you're just incompetent in making bad decisions. But it's one of the two, because again, leaving $10 billion a year on the table, I think the $10 billion number is roughly 7% of what the industry is making as a whole. You're not good at your job. And again, look, I'm not saying that I individually could be better. I'm saying we should find the people who are. And it might not be me, but someone out there, if you gave them that opportunity, they're going to find that 7% and put it in your company's coffers. And if I'm a shareholder at one of these companies, I want you to find the person who is capable of that. That is the job. So yeah.
You've done, I guess, a version of what I would call open sourcing this knowledge, right? It's out there, everybody can use it. You could have gone the other direction, I imagine, and trying to find a way to make it proprietary and just something that you would profit from or a company you worked for would profit from. Why'd you take that choice?
Well, I mean, to be clear, the Blacklist is a for-profit company. I never want to give people the impression that this is an entirely altruistic goal. The for-profit company that I built recognizes that A, there's a real value in gathering information and putting it in the public square, and B, that it can be a tide that raises all boats, and most especially the boats of writers, by aggregating it and making it available. So I think that, I think fundamentally it's better it's the only way that I could build the company, but it's also the thing that is best for the aggregate health and the aggregate sort of financial fortunes of the business as a whole. I think I'm just and I think the other thing is, I don't know, it's just more interesting to me. Mm-hmm. It's more interesting to me to create an infrastructure that allows anyone, anywhere who has written something great to put that in front of the people who can do something with it. And I think we all benefit in one way or another, especially if you're just an audience member. You benefit from all of the best talent having an opportunity to succeed. So I joke that on some level, all of this is selfish because I just want better movies so that I can stay home and watch them instead of like leave my house and be social. And it's a joke, but it's also sort of true. It's like, okay, if as a movie fan, as a fan of reading, as a fan of storytelling, as a fan of a storytelling world that looks like the world, what is it that I can build to be helpful to get us closer to that? And that's kind of the work that I've been doing.
What's the best thing a screenwriter who's been on the blacklist has said to you about what it's done for them?
You know what's interesting? I think the best thing I've ever heard from a writer isn't like a positive thing, right? Well, I mean, it is, but it wasn't like, oh my God, you changed my life, or oh my God, Ben Affleck read the script because it was in the blacklist, or whatever. Those are great, but I also don't know that, Benedict Cumberbatch said that the reason he read The Imitation Game was because it was #1 on the blacklist, right? Meryl Streep mentioned the blacklist on Charlie Rose, which, don't get me wrong, pretty great.
Mom must have liked that.
I love that. Who cares about my mom? Meryl Streep commented on something that I did. Life complete. But no, I actually think the things that the comments that really make me sort of reflect on like the work that we've done are when I get emails, usually like to our like general email list on the Blacklist website, from people who have no connection to Hollywood at all, and they're like, hey, listen, I submitted my script to the Blacklist website, and your reader ripped it to shreds. But for the first time, I have a sense of like where I should be aspiring as a writer, and I'm excited to go do a rewrite on it because I like understand or think I have an understanding of like what it means to write a good screenplay. And that's really exciting to me because, Graham Moore, he had an agent when the script was on the Imitation Game was on the blacklist. Like, maybe that gets to Benedict Cumberbatch. Maybe he reads it anyway. I don't know for a fact that the blacklist is the reason why that thing, maybe it catalyzed it, accelerated it, but maybe it would have happened anyway. What's exciting to me about those emails is that I don't think there's an outlet for that person to get that kind of feedback. It's unlikely that if you live in my hometown, you're ever gonna come across somebody who has the experience to give you the kind of feedback on your script that would allow you to even right-size yourself towards what could be eventually a screenplay that someone would care about. And so knowing that, me and the team have built something that allows for that is maybe the thing that I think I appreciate most. That's a long way to answer that question, but I think it makes sense.
It's a good answer. All right, we gotta talk about AI in some way, I'm sorry.
No, I think it's one of the most relevant things, but you have to talk about it.
There's so many different ways into that conversation, but I guess I just want to ask you, having started the Blacklist 20 years ago, and where we are now in the industry with AI, which can completely transform it on so many different levels at every stage of production and release and assessment. In terms of finding those original stories that have done so well via the Blacklist process, what role do you see for AI?
I don't think that AI is terribly powerful when it comes to identifying art that will move the human spirit. And that's kind of what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. So when our readers read something, they're not reading for a checklist of things. Did a writer do X, Y, and Z? Does it have 3 acts? Is there a main protagonist? Blah, blah, blah. What we ask our readers to do is to rate things on a scale of 1 to 10 based on how likely they would be to recommend it to a peer or superior in the industry. And what we're really trying to capture is that feeling that you have when you watch or read something and you finish it and you just want to tell everybody, like, oh my God, this is amazing, you have to check it out. Like, what makes you jump in the group chat or jump on social media and tell people about it? Or conversely, what makes you jump into the group chat and warn everybody that it's not worth their time? But like, I know when I see movies, and I'm sure I'll see some at the festival. Like, I remember the first time I saw Parasite. Like, it was like an 8 a.m. screening in New York, and I was standing under a rail, like under sort of a awning at 10:30 a.m., texting everyone I knew to be like, "Yo, this movie, see it the first chance you get," right? And I don't, and I think that is about how a movie makes you feel. And I'm sure that AI can simulate, and I want to emphasize simulate that based on looking back at every other movie or every other sort of story and how it succeeded, but it's not very forward-looking. It's not going to capture a narrative innovation. It's not going to capture how a person describes falling in love. It's not going to capture the vulnerability that a parent feels for the first time when their child leaves the house without their supervision. And I think that's the thing with storytelling and art in general that makes it special. Now, I do think that AI has a lot of uses, right? And I think that AI as a tool should be a tool for artists as artists see fit, in the same way that Google is a tool for artists as artists see fit. I don't have any problem with an artist not going to Italy to look at the corner of two streets so that they can describe it when they can just go on Google Street View and do the same thing. Like, I think that's a good thing. And I think that AI, if the AI has been trained on material that the company has purchased the rights to, and that the writer is using it as a tool and not as the creator of the art, I don't really have a problem with it. Okay. But again, I think that most of these AI companies, these large language models, have not paid for the rights to train their machine. Yeah. When if I want to start a bakery and I need to steal the muffins so that I can sell them, maybe I shouldn't have a bakery. And I think that's kind of the same thing with a lot of these things. So I think the notion of the technology is interesting. There's serious ethical questions about how it has been implemented. And I think there are bigger questions around its value vis-a-vis art, outside of it being a tool for artists.
All right, well said. We're going to go to you now for your questions. We want to allow some time for your questions for Franklin as well. If you've got a question, we do not have mics in the crowd, so either you speak up or you just speak in your normal voice, and I'll try to repeat the question. Let's go over here first. Yes.
Hi, my name is Roman. I'm based here in Toronto, and I recently connected with some writers who's got that same ethos of you talking about now they can.
I'm going to stop you.
Yeah,
because
we are going to need you to speak up a little bit.
I have some minor hearing issues. So if there's a
Is this better?
That's better.
Okay, great. I'm a producer here based in Toronto. My name is Lovan, and I recently got connected with some Somali writers who had that same ethos you were talking about of like having somebody be able to look at their script, rip it to shreds, and be able to kind of give them a vision forward. And so I think I'm just wondering, when you were thinking about making the Blacklist, like that ethos, I think you're a technologist, right? And I think when we think about technologists, like nowadays, like Meta and all that, it's like that capitalistic ethos, like I just want to make as much money as possible. So how did you balance that, like that square of like writers, producers, these people coming together, and then that decision to make it the way that you made it and made it like accessible to people? So I'm like, what was that ethos for you?
Yeah.
If I understand the question, so you're working with a group of Somali storytellers, a writer who had their script ripped apart, and there's a community that's doing that, and you're asking about the ethos between writer, producer, director.
Charge them like $100 to put on the Blacklist, right?
Yeah.
And like anybody can. That's like, but you chose to be like, I'm gonna make it accessible to people who are maybe not in business, and it's like about making this a sustainable tool, and not just like you said,
Yeah.
trying to make as much money as possible.
Yeah, the ethos of the accessibility of the Blacklist.
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking, like, why haven't I tried to make more money? No, I mean, but that is, I think, the root question. It's a fair question, right? I think I just I never went into this with the goal of maximizing profit. And I say that knowing full well that, like, if any of you are venture capitalists, you might be very disappointed to hear that, and I'm sorry if you don't want to invest in me, but it's still your loss. But I know I just never went into it trying to maximize profit, right? I genuinely went into building this thing to solve a problem that I thought existed, and I believe that if we could solve the problem, I could build a sustainable business that would allow me to live comfortably, would be able to pay for, salaries to my employees and make sure they had health care, because that's necessary in the US, where it's not socialized. Not happy about that, but anyway. And also allow people who are writers and are probably struggling financially and don't have a ton of money to access this tool and this service at a reasonable cost. And if they can't, at the cost that we've set, there are fee waivers so that you can apply and we will give it to you for free once a year. And I will also very publicly say, until you have exhausted all of the free feedback at your disposal, don't spend your money on our website, because what's probably gonna happen is you're gonna upload your script, our reader's gonna be like, this ain't good, and you're gonna be like, damn, I should have gotten more feedback for free from my friends and made the script better before spending money on it. Now I gotta go get that feedback and then spend more money on it, right? Like, don't waste your money. So I think I just never had the impulse to maximize profit, but I also believe that if we could solve this problem at scale, there's a much more valuable business to build on top of it that doesn't involve charging writers a lot of money. So this, if you're a VC in the audience, this is the interesting part to you. We just launched an expansion to fiction. So writers can submit their screenplays, their television pilots, their plays, and their novels. One can imagine the amount of information that we will gather about narrative culture. One can imagine the consulting businesses that we can create serving any number of different media operations about, hey, you should be aware that there's an unpublished novel written by an English language writer that lives in Portugal, and you're looking for an action franchise. Here you go. You can translate it to one of the many dialects that movies are made in India and have a massive franchise in India, right? So I think I wanted to build this thing brick by brick and turn it into something that would have been impossible to build if in the early days our primary focus was delivering a multiple to a venture investor who didn't really care about the mission at all.
Thank you. Great answer. Let's go over here first, and then we'll come back. How did you build your team?
Actually, wait, are Megan and Kate here, or do they blow this off to go watch a movie? I actually don't see them because they're at screenings probably at Scotiabank, which will give you some sense about the kind of people that I hire, right? Let's see. So the two women that I'm referring to, Megan Halpern and Kate Hagen, have been working at the company for 10 years, literally almost since it started. And I'd say that's one of the things I'm most proud of, because they're both very talented and they could definitely get other jobs, and they've chosen to continue to work for me, or with me. Kate started as a reader for us. I then hired her to run customer support because I knew she was a good reader and could arbitrate complaints. I then elevated her to run social media, and then elevated her to run about half of our partnerships, because she was smart, she did the work, I could trust her, and I knew that she would continue to do great in whatever role that I put her in. Megan Halpern had never worked in film and television when I hired her. She'd been a book publicist, but I knew she cared about stories. I knew she cared about writers, so I hired her to run events and help me run the screenwriters labs. And we've gone from 1 lab to 3 labs, multiple events every year, and she runs the other half of our partnerships. I just mentioned that we expanded into fiction. Literally 2 days ago was the public announcement. The person that I hired was a young man named Randy Winston, who had been the head of writer programs at the Center for Fiction in New York. When I went looking for what was a very non-traditional job, I told a bunch of people in the publishing world, I'm looking for someone, this is all the things they need to do. They need to be comfortable with technology, they need to be like very pro-writer, they need to know fiction well, I need to be able to send them into any room and know that they're gonna come out of it with the respect of the people that were in that room. And what made me know that he was the right person for me to hire was in our first meeting, I walked him through what I wanted to build, and he said, okay, yeah, all of that's great, it's definitely gonna be helpful, but the one thing that you definitely need to add to that is making sure that there are free public resources for writers who may be interested in learning more about how to navigate the publishing industry and how to like get feedback on their novels. And like, yes, provide the platform. This platform's amazing. I'm super excited about it. But if you're not also providing the free resources to people, like what's even the point, right? And so again, some of it is just it's an ethics thing. It's like, why are you doing this? If the goal is just to make as much money as possible, you're not gonna fit in with our culture, right? And also like, you're dumb, because this job is not the way to make them, like, hopefully you're smart enough to recognize that this is not the best way to make money, right? There are other jobs for that, if that is the goal. And no judgment, right? Like, life's hard and weird, do what you gotta do. So I think it's about, why are you doing this? It's about finding people who do the work, and it's about finding people who are good teammates. One of the most important things for me when it comes to putting together the team is this a person who by instinct will step up for their coworker if their coworker needs them? And I think that is that like looking for that type has served me well. Everything I'll say is, I'd say a lot of my team has historically been people that are overlooked by other folks in Hollywood for whatever reason. Maybe they don't have the right school on their resume. Maybe they don't look the way a person in the industry traditionally looks. And that's great for me, because if you guys are bad at valuation and understanding who has talent, I'm gonna snap that right up, and I'm gonna be able to punch far above my weight, because I have a bunch of people that, you guys don't realize are as amazing as they are. And I think I'm sensitive to that because, look, when I walk into a room, people don't necessarily clock who I actually am, right? And it's annoying sometimes, but it also means I have an advantage. Definitely. And I am more than happy to take advantage of their stupidity all day, twice on Sunday.
Love it. All right, we'll go here and then back over, and then we may have to wrap there. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Savannah, so I understand
All right, right on.
the small town mentality. You continue to forge your own path. You're very confident. What advice do you have for people that they want to make their own path, but it's like when you hear your mom say, "Why not do this career?" When you walk into a room, just how did you bet on yourself? How did you continue to bet on yourself?
Can you just say the last part again?
How did you continue to bet on yourself?
Oh, how did you continue to bet on yourself and choose the path that you wanted?
The confidence is, I don't want to say fake. I think it's hard won, and it's not consistent, right? Like, you're seeing me after a week of barely sleeping because of how nervous I was about the book launch 2 days ago. Like, I got a good night's sleep last night, but if you had seen me on Wednesday, nothing about me would be equated with confidence. Anxiety would have been the dominant feature. It's funny, I joke about this with my mom a lot. She was like, yeah, why couldn't you have just done something more normal? And it's like, you did this. This is your fault. Like, you're the one, when I was a kid, who was like, you can do anything. You're the one who told me if you work hard and you learn what you need to learn and you listen to people and you put a good team around you, you can do anything. It's like, I just listened to, like, if you hadn't done that, I probably would be a lawyer right now. But it's true, right? I was very lucky that I had two parents, black parents, in the deep South of America in the 80s and 90s, who basically said to me and my siblings, like, if you're willing to put in the work, the entire world is available to you. and you know, tricked us into believing that that was true. And what's wild is, it kind of has been for us. Like, I mean, you guys are familiar with sort of what I do. My younger brother is a former professional soccer player who is now an emergency room physician, right? My younger sister has a master's in social work specifically focused on Black and brown women's mortality and does work with trans teens, right? It's a reflection of our work, but it's also it's more a reflection of our parents. And the values that they inculcated in us. And so I think for me, it has been a combination of wanting to feel like a member of a community, being willing and interested and knowing that it's necessary to put the work in to be a part of a community, and believing that with enough work, I can figure anything out. And then also, knowing that you're not always going to figure it out and that you are going to fail. And that the mark of a successful person is not failing, it's failing and recovering. And that last part took me a long time to learn. I was definitely a person who was like, I shouldn't do that, I probably won't work out, right? And I think the more I embrace this idea that like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, like some of this is not gonna work, but who cares? You know, be in your feelings about it for a night, wake up tomorrow morning and get back to work.
Franklin, thank you. We are going to have to wrap it there. Unfortunately, we're past time, but you've given incredible answers and such insight today.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to say one more quick thing. So the Blacklist has been over 20 years. The first time I came to Toronto was, I want to say, like the year after the first Blacklist came out. It might have even been 2005. So I've been coming to this festival for a long time. It remains the thing for me that I'm most excited about every year, because I know I'm going to see a bunch of amazing movies. I love the festival. It has been a real honor to know you for as long as I have. And so thank you for all of your work, and thank you to all of the volunteers and all of the folks that work at the Toronto Film Festival. Because it's always, from day one, it always felt like home. And that's because of all the people who put it on, and the people who check your badge, and the people who make sure that the movies start on time. And they always start right on time. Like it was a joke amongst my friends. So anyway, thank you to everybody who's been involved with this festival. Thank you for taking time out of your morning to come hear me blather. Yeah, anyway.
Thank you all for coming.